It is 1 o'clock. Okay. Well, greetings, everyone. It is now 1 p.m. It is April 14th. Some milestones. It's my birthday.
How old are you?
Happy birthday.
68. Thank you. Thank
Also,
you.
Happy birthday.
So we'll call the meeting to order, and we have present 2 commissioners, I think, thus far. Is there anyone else on video? I'm remote, and we have Linda Laird, soon to be High Priestess of Beach Resiliency for Captiva. And Daniel Mont, we have our Executive Director, Jennifer Nelson. Is anyone else present outside of our presenters?
James, and we have Dan.
Dr. Sam, okay, and Nicole, and who else is, all right, so it'll now begin, and we're gonna have public comment.
Big pile as well.
Oh, Dick Piles in. Hi, Dick, welcome. And we're going to have our presentations first, and then prior to public comment, there's been some emails from our SCCF Sea Level Rise Captain, and we have some notables from the chairman and the president and vice president of the community panel, and and we have some other participants. Let's see. Well, let's see. Oh, we have attendees. I think. Yes. Do I hear a voice? Oh, we have from the city of Sanibel, Joel. How do you pronounce? Is it Coe? It's E-T-T-E French, and that's silent. So is it et? Coet? What is it? One at a time, please. How do you pronounce say Coet? And if you're in Paris, Monsieur Coet, s'il vous plaît. Anyway, okay. So, Coet. I don't know if that in France that would fly. No offense. Okay, so let's begin. Yes, yes.
So on our agenda, we have public comments at the beginning.
No, I updated it.
Okay, so hopefully what we will do is encourage discussion throughout.
Yeah, the public comment
We're gonna have public comment
at the end of the
At the
presentation.
end of the presentation, after you talk about what SCCF said and the panel said.
Right. Yeah, we just said that, Linda. I'd like 2 minutes ago.
And I don't know, I would like to keep inviting public comment.
Well, they are
If it's
welcome
appropriate.
to, anybody that's participating via Zoom is welcome to type comments into the chat, and we can stop at pause at certain times and then read them.
Okay, so, but we don't want to turn this into a 4-hour workshop. So through each phase of the presentation, we can open it up for public comment. But Nicole, can you tell us how long is the presentation uninterrupted?
Hi,
Hi,
so the
Nicole.
presentation is not very long. We intended this to be a very open dialogue. We have, I think, maybe like 5 slides just walking you through it. And I don't want to drive the presentation with what we think. I think this is where we're coming to meet with the panel, to meet with SCCF, to meet with the CEPD and really discuss our proposal and see if there's any edits we have. It's meant to be an open conversation today.
I got you. Okay, good. Old school. I like that. All right, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. I didn't know if this is going to be a half an hour before someone speaks and then, all right. So
we don't want to bore you with slides information. I think, you gain more out of a, conversation and a discussion than us telling you something.
Okay, so if only I can ask if there's someone from the audience, if there could be an interruption at the appropriate time when I can ask if that question, can be said. And yeah, so in other words, so we just don't want to go, we want to make it as, I'm not looking for streamlined, but I am looking for fruitful. We don't want to digress and go off into tangents. So if we can have the best of both worlds, that would be fantastic. All right, so any other questions, Linda or Mr. Pyle? Jennifer, anybody? Good. So shall we begin? Nicole and Samantha, Dr. Samantha, excuse me, you have the floor.
Great.
Thank you very much. Nicole, do you want to introduce her?
Sure. I'll start. Nicole Sharp. I am the coastal market lead at APTIM. And Samantha, I'll let you hop in and introduce yourself to the panel.
Good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Samantha Danchuk. I think I've had the opportunity to meet most of you remotely, at least now. We're going to just kind of describe, we've submitted 2 proposals at your request to help get you ready first for the September 1st kind of deadline for the initial state funding that's available for resilience planning and implementation projects. But that's second have the work that's necessary in order to get you ready for the action you want to take to implement projects and move forward with you know, the priority projects that you've raised. So I'll just flip through a few slides. So the first is really just identifying the issue. Do you want me to share my screen or do you have them in front of you?
You can share it.
How does that look to you?
Like you.
Yeah, we don't say anything.
I'm not seeing anything.
You want us to,
I have them pulled up. I can pull them up if you need
Okay,
to.
great. Sounds great. It's so quick, it's not worth spending the effort. So the first is just acknowledging that you already have some idea of what your vulnerabilities are from the previous assessment. And, you know, we're facing, you know, increase in tidal flooding. You know, if the problem goes unaddressed in the next, you know, 40 to 50 years, you'll be seeing, you know, really permanent flooding in many of the low-lying areas around the year. The National Risk Index has estimated that there's a potential loss of almost $500,000 annually already. This is a result of flooding, either from extreme events or kind of the regular flooding that may happen with back-to-back storms. Also acknowledging that in the previous assessment, they found a tipping point between 2 and 4 feet of sea level rise. And that's significant because it gives you the opportunity to make important choices about when you will make certain investments and which locations, you know, what you want to advocate for as far as your short and long-term strategies. And a lot will happen in that time frame that you need to get ready for. And so it's really important to understand all of your adaptation options and when those specific decisions need to be made and how you need to make those investments collectively with your regional partners in order to build a resilient island. So I think just to emphasize, the reason that we're trying to make these investments today is that it's really, if you're building new infrastructure, there's a significant savings in building first resiliently rather than having to come back and replace equipment or infrastructure that has failed earlier than its designed life. And then also, you have the opportunity in that you're aware of the problems. You can make these investments over time in a way that's manageable and avoid some of these either catastrophic losses or really just, you know, disturbances and nuisances on a regular basis. And so that's the goal, is to holistically look at, you know, both your jurisdictional area as well as what it takes for you to live a high quality of life long term, and figure out how to, you know, plan for adaptation and make those investments today. Okay, so the next slide is introducing the first proposal that we submitted. And so this is the smaller one, trying to get you ready.
We are not seeing the slides.
Yeah, James, can you get the slide up, please?
they're up. Hold
I might
on,
not be sure.
hang on.
Stop and share. Is it this one?
Yeah, that one, yeah.
I see them.
I see them also. I'm not hearing anyone.
I was just waiting for him to make it full screen, but thank you very much for pulling that up. I think we
Yeah,
can
it's
all
not-
see the slide. So want to acknowledge that this initial proposal is based on my understanding that there's a need to avoid any redundancy with previous work or with work that's ongoing in the region. There's an interest in moving forward past kind of the study phase and preparing you for implementation. And so this first proposal is intended to develop a deliverable that can be attached to any of your initial grant applications so that you are eligible for the state funding and meeting the state statute requirement for a vulnerability assessment. And so I have just a few check boxes on the right. You can see that there's already either through the 2020 report or publicly available data, there's already several of the requirements for state eligibility for funding, but there are a few things that need to be added to that and packaged so that you can then move forward and put forward a grant application in September. So the pieces that we will be adding are related to describing the impacts and vulnerabilities associated with sea level rise, plus considerations of rainfall and storm surge, how those compound, and that came up in your last meeting. What's the process of kind of adding those together? The next is the state has very specific planning horizons of 2040 and 2070 that are required for the analysis, as well as requesting that you look at the NOAA intermediate low and the NOAA intermediate high sea level rise scenarios. And so while the 2020 report did look at like 1, 2, 3 and 4 feet of sea level, or 1, 2 and 4 feet of sea level rise, and that gives you very useful information. We want to make sure that it's blatant and explicitly describing the scenarios that the state has requested and giving them the information that they need in order to put forward a grant opportunity for you. The second piece of,
This is Linda, maybe just a sidetrack, but if we would look at a 100-year storm or 500-year storm and all of that, it's not a pretty scenario here. I'm wondering, in your experience, the fact if we all go underwater at that point, does that mean we won't get anything?
I think that's an excellent question. I think the box that they're trying to check at first is determining the vulnerability. So it's a yes or no question. And you're showing vulnerability to those, rainfall, surge, as well as sea level rise.
So you don't, in your experience, you don't know if we will. So I'm looking at like your boxes checked on the left, the third and the fourth one. You don't have any experience or knowledge that if we show that kind of vulnerability, I'm not saying not to show that vulnerability, but you don't know how that would affect the application process or the grant process, do you?
Well, so it depends. So this chart is just sharing what the state requirements are for their eligibility. When you apply for federal funding, there's different requirements about, they may require in certain areas where adaptation is not feasible, that there's other programs to participate in, possibly property buyouts and relocation. They have specific standards for the infrastructure that can be built back in those areas. So depending on what we're applying for, we're going to tailor the application and the information that's provided to make sure, well, plus we wouldn't want to put a project forward that wouldn't be eligible for funding, right? Or that didn't make sense for the community. So that's all kind of part of the evaluation process that we'll definitely move through in step 2. Step 1 is really just trying to make sure you're meeting all the requirements for the state funding, which is an important piece. So.
Oh, I agree.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And just to emphasize, so the reason why we're, looking at the state funding is if you apply for a grant from the state, and you've communicated to them your vulnerabilities. Those vulnerabilities are being added to the statewide resilience plan and hopefully designated for funding, which is a requirement that they have to go through over the next 3 years. And so if you don't go through that process, they don't know what your issues are necessarily, and you're not on any list kind of waiting for funding. And as you know, through the beach program, when you apply for state funding, it's very, very important to be on these lists, to be prioritized and ranked highly, and to be recognized, you know, for your needs. So it's important to get in line now. That's why, you know, we had wanted to apply this last September, but there are a few things that are necessary that are now going to be available by this next fall, if that's helpful. So the second piece of this first scope is to move forward with that target deadline and put forward a conceptual project. And I think based on discussions that I've heard of your interests, that it's likely that we could come up, oh, if we could just go back 1 second. So this initial scope is putting together a conceptual project to advance an grant application to the state. It's also identifying all of your funding options so that we can make a plan for what it is that you want to do next. Some of the federal grant applications actually require stakeholder engagement. We, of course, would want that to be part of the process regardless, but there's actually specific requirements, and you have to document and advance with your application how you have reached out to stakeholders, what the kind of results were from those communications, and how other regional entities have adopted your plans and projects into their own. And then, of course, the actual development of an application is part of this first scope. Pause there for any initial questions.
Yeah, this is Jen. I wanted to ask a question. So how does what you're proposing complement, accentuate, or differ from what we've already received from the community panel from Dr. Cheryl Hapke, and also from what South Seas has proposed most recently?
So that's a great question. As we talked about on the last call for the first piece, it sounds like the South Seas vulnerability assessment will be looking at these same risks with the intent that they would be, you know, essentially they're essentially going through a vulnerability assessment to look at what infrastructure within their property is vulnerable and identifying those risks. So that information is relevant. I think it was the time frame, right, of when this would be most useful to advance a grant application by September. You actually, I mean, you've had multiple meetings on this subject. It's my understanding that the commission is relatively familiar with the vulnerabilities on the island. This is more so just making sure you have what you need in order to be able to advance an application.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Carrie? Hello?
Yeah.
On your note, you said there were some differences. I don't remember what they were.
Well, I think it was potentially the data sources used, and you know, I don't know what kind of modeling efforts, you know, APTIM might employ. So Nicole and Sam, if you might, you know, just trying to kind of interpret the scope of work, you know, it might be helpful to talk a little bit about process, if that would be okay. You know, is there gonna be modeling involved, or kind of what would prompt your choices around what kind of data? I understand there's like minimum requirements for the state, but what would kind of prompt those choices? And
You got it. So for 2 reasons. Three reasons. One, I've heard the interest in getting moving on this work, right? It's not time for studying and long-term model studies for this initial task. 2, I am a coastal modeler and have been working for the past 7 years as the Assistant Chief Resilience Officer for local government at the county level, and have been working directly with FEMA and NOAA and all of the modelers that have been doing work within our area, as well as the Corps. And so I probably am one of the few people that have the most familiarity with what work has already been done. And so I would like to use model results from, you know, the simplest tool is the sea level rise sketch planning tool, right? which are really overlaps well with what's already been done. The CDAS modeling from the Army Corps of Engineers allows us to pull any storm scenario that FEMA or the Corps has modeled for the South Atlantic coastal study, and we can see those results locally. I've already downloaded those. We have the FEMA maps and an assessment of what's happened, what happens during extreme storms, which includes both rainfall and coastal modeling. We have slosh modeling from evacuation studies. And then we have the coastal management, really history that APTIM has been a part of in building the beaches and the wave modeling that has been done for the island previously. So I feel like there is a lot of information available that we can pull from to meet these minimum requirements, as well as advise on what the conceptual project should be to move forward. And we can quickly move this forward so that you are not only ready by September 1st, but I mean, you need time to discuss this within your own process and stakeholders. I don't want to waste time proposing a huge study for this first task. I want to get you up and running so you're ready for this first opportunity.
Excuse me, I would like to thank both of you. Carrie, that was a very good question. We want to see how sharp you were, Dr. Sam, and you came out like a samurai sword. So beautiful, just well done on the two of you. Thank you very much.
Can I ask a question, Renee?
Yes, of course. Who's that? Oh, David.
Yes.
Unofficial. How are you?
Yes, Samantha, I'm trying to understand the distinction between the two different proposals. And, I think it's important that I'm trying to understand it so that we can bring it back to the panel and we can have some discussion at the panel at our next meeting and, come back with any recommendations, et cetera. So the first proposal is for about $4,800 or so. That's how I understand it. And the first is just updating the vulnerability. That's the first thing you're going to do, as I understand it, correct? I would suggest, and I don't know if you were there when South Seas made this presentation, but my understanding is that Brizzaga is doing exactly the same for the whole island. It probably makes sense to contact Brizzaga and see to what extent you can share that information in terms of updating the vulnerability study that Cheryl Hapke started. So that would be my first thought. The second is, you say that you're going to identify the greatest challenges. I'm not quite sure what that means. Maybe you could just explain what that means. When you mean identify it or actually try to resolve them? I mean, like some of the challenges related to private property, CEPD's jurisdiction. Is that something you're going to resolve and try to come up with answers with as part of this proposal, or are you just going to identify the issues that we have to figure out over time?
Right, so for this first scope of work, what I'm calling Part A, our goal is to advance a grant application to the state in September. Months before that, you'll need a draft that you are working through together and deciding what pieces need to be part of that, refining that. And so in order to move that quickly, it's already April, right? In order to move that quickly, we need to just check some of these boxes off to meet state eligibility requirements. And we need to decide on the project that will be advanced as part of this initial grant application. And so I agree with you. Yes, we plan to coordinate with Alec and Brizzaga as they move forward in their process. It's my understanding that South Seas will not be eligible to advance a grant application in the fall because they're a private entity. So they have different objectives in their vulnerability assessment. Our objective is to finalize the vulnerabilities assessment that's required by the state, select a project, move forward through your stakeholder process in order to get this application in time, well vetted, with something that you're actually interested in moving forward with. So that's really the hope for this initial piece.
Okay, so can you just, maybe I'm just thick here and I'm not understanding, but could you explain what a conceptual project and documentation is? I mean, I understand you're going to submit up to 4 applications for particular grants, but I'm having a tough time figuring out exactly what kind of project you're envisioning that can be submitted for by September. Maybe you can just give us some idea of what conceptual project you're thinking about, or possible projects that could be completed by September.
Right, so and maybe it might be helpful to just run through the next slide and talk about the two together. It's up to you, because it sounds like we're overlapping maybe what's in scope 1 and scope 2.
Well, I'm trying to,
But
that's what I'm
just to share a
Yeah.
conceptual, sorry.
that's what I'm trying to understand, because I'm trying with proposal 1, and it's in proposal 1 that you're talking about the 4 applications for funding for conceptual projects, which is that dependent on proposal 2, or is that independent from proposal 2?
So I'll say last September or last August, CEPD had reached out to us for help with developing a project description that could be advanced for the first round of state funding. And we talked about things like really, intense dune restoration. We talked about living shorelines and enhancing the mangroves. We talked about kind of other small project opportunities that could be combined in order to deliver some resilience to storm surge and wave energy around the island that was within the jurisdiction of CEPD, right? So that was a concept that we started to develop. We didn't have, there wasn't sufficient time, and actually CEPD was not eligible to apply for the grant. So now we have the second opportunity to kind of come together. What is the concept of the project, of something that CEPD has direct kind of authority over, and what could they advance as part of the grant application? In the second scope, we have the opportunity to evaluate a much larger kind of scope of evaluation, a scope of alternatives, right? We can look at projects that only CEPD would be responsible for. We can look at projects that they may want to advocate for that directly affect the properties that you take care of. Partnerships, this is where, there's important to have that engagement with South Seas and other private property owners to see if there's something collectively that needs to be done. By that time, Lee County will be undergoing their resilience assessment, and they will be soliciting projects that they want to include in their county-wide resilience plan. And so those are the types of alternatives that we need to evaluate in that second scope. You need to have justification for, what it is that you would like to advocate for. And, you need to basically kind of move that process along for the priority projects that you would like to advance. Because by the time, the county comes forward and says, we see these types of projects might be useful in these areas, they are not going to be ready for permitting or shovel-ready projects that are going to be the requirements for some of the federal funding infrastructure opportunities that are available. So we want to be very careful not to duplicate work, but we do want you to be ready in time for you to take advantage of whatever opportunities are coming your way.
Samantha, I have a question. Should I say Samantha, or can I say Dr. Samantha or Dr. Dan?
Sam is fine. So totally Sam, I will respond.
I have 7 cousins named Sam after my grandfather.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, so my question is, I was just thinking, and to your knowledge, how many barrier islands and, along the coast, the Gulf Coast of Florida are, to the best of your knowledge, are currently engaged like we are? Like Tampa area, are they involved? Boca Grande, are they doing their own thing? I mean, to your knowledge, how many areas, entities?
Quite a few. So, I'll say I've been involved in this work for the past 10 plus years.
Okay.
Planning for adaptation to sea level rise. Southeast Florida has had the benefit of working regionally to advance planning and projects for the past, 9 plus years.
Okay.
Southwest Florida has had less of an opportunity to work regionally. So I think they have really benefited from the state and federal funding that has become available in the past 2 to 3 years. And so that's why you're starting to see more kind of county level assessments come forward. But as far as islands, we have been working with the town of Longboat Key, for the past, I would say 4 years on resilience related work. They asked for very specific looking at each asset. Like we took surveyed the actual elevation of every piece of drainage infrastructure that they have, looking at every finished floor elevation of each asset. So,
Well, no, Sam, the reason I was asking, it was sort of a big picture thought. And, could this be a George Washington moment where there could be one entity trying to cross-reference with all the other entities, let's call it the 50 states, or saying, hey, we're all working in our own direction, but maybe someone should kind of be the advocate to not bring everyone together as much as cross-reference with each other to share ideals, share engineering designs, renderings. I mean, this could be a watershed moment that no one has said, hey, who's leading the show here? We need, someone, I'm thinking of like either like for example, with Kerry or with anyone, maybe there's an opportunity here to take a leadership role with the rest of the entire Gulf Coast of Florida, saying we should all be talking to each other and working off of each strengths. And it just came to me and I just wanted to blurt it out because that's the way I'm on.
That's role of the compact, Renee. And I think they sort of have taken that as their area of work. So I'm not sure how successful all of it's going to be, but I think that's their job.
Well, there's jobs and there's leaders.
I'll just add, in my experience, it's important that everybody leads on what's important to them. So you have incredible opportunity to really demonstrate these kind of what they're calling green infrastructure projects, right? So try and integrate something that is improving water quality or creating habitat, in addition to providing the hard infrastructure that may protect you against, kind of surge flooding or the tidal flooding, or, improving your drainage. So those kind of combination projects, there are not that many of them that are, actively being monitored for performance. So the sooner you get to that point, you will become a model for others.
So in other words, lead the community, then lead the country. Gotcha. It's just
Samantha, can I go back? I mean, I'm trying to get for the panel's perspective, trying to understand exactly what the first proposal is. The second proposal, which we can get to, which I have some questions about, I understand it's going to be a continuation of what the Sea Level Rise Committee has done. And, we did the vulnerability study, we did some resiliency conceptual options, and you're going to take that the next step and develop that further and then implement some of those projects on the ground, which I have some about the way the proposal is written, but I'm leave that aside for a second. I'm going back to the first proposal, and I still can't get my arms around what you're talking about when you say conceptual project and documentation, and then that you submit 4 applications. And I can't understand, because again, I want to bring it back to the panel. I can't understand what those applications would be for at this stage of the game, since we haven't gotten to the second proposal yet. So something between now and September is going to allow you to create 4 specific applications for grants. And I can't quite understand grants for what. Is it for, it's not for mangroves, it's not for, or is it, what are those grant applications for? What are we going to be entitled to seek money for by September that APTIM will be able to put together and submit? That's separate and apart from project proposal 2. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Absolutely. So like I've said, it's my understanding that CEPD has an interest in advancing a grant application. So your question is, what type of projects could you advance? So I'll just share, the state is offering funding for planning. They're offering funding for the pre-construction services. So like permitting, project design. They offer funding for actual implementation, so construction. And so those are kind of the buckets of funding that are available. So the types of projects that you might be interested in, I shared the one that we had discussed last year, which was related to dune restoration, wetlands, and kind of other enhancement project. Okay. If there's something beyond that we feel that, you have the information that it's justified and that you're ready to move forward and you have a partner. So if you want to work with some of the, if it's an engagement opportunity and you want to work with some of the private property owners, whatever you have jurisdiction over is what you can receive funding for. Otherwise, you need to have a partnership and explain how you're going to, share that funding in order to solve the problem holistically.
So
You may
Sam,
want to partner with the city, you may want to partner with the county, but you kind of need your reasoning for why you would want to put that project together.
Sam, am I hearing that you're saying that we could possibly create some examples of living seawalls? I'm just throwing one rendering out there, rendering concept that's already out there. Living seawalls that we could get, all the three items that you said, the permitting, the construction costs, et cetera. Could that be a reality? Let's say we were just focused, not just focused, but we're ready with a design, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, for certain areas to have living seawalls. I'm just throwing an example out. Are you saying that by September, there is a chance we could actually have it all in place, that we could be considered acceptable from start to finish, where even the construction in a perfect world could be paid for? And of course, it might be on private areas, private residents. Well, they're not private residents because it belongs to the county. The water, the privacy stops when the water begins on the bayside.
So Nicole, I'll ask you to advise, is there a seawall that the CEPD owns that we could work on first?
So I think just going back to what Renee was saying, Renee, so you're asking, could you be fully funded for the planning, pre-con services, project design, and construction of a project?
Right.
So
the question is, in the area, let's say the Blind Pass area.
Okay.
That we want to raise the living seawall, which is in existence now in some areas. We want to lengthen it and make it higher, like a couple of feet, for example. And so my question to you is, now, it's not really on private property. It's where the water begins and the person's plotted land ends. So my question is, it's more of it's not like you're putting it on, the CEPD doesn't know. Well, no, they do own it. I see your point. Yeah. So the answer is yes.
How does the CEPD own it?
Well, the CEPD has jurisdiction over it. That's what's right. Are we on the same page, Nicole?
Yes, but I think for that project, the funding kind of comes in two different pools. You can have your planning, your design, and pre-con services. And then the construction pool money is separate. So you have to, show that you've met all the requirements and are substantially or relatively through the process of your planning pre-con services before you can get that construction funding.
Understood. But if we were to check off all the original boxes, we can't check off the box of construction money in September, but we can check off the other boxes.
Correct.
That's absolutely fabulous.
Well, I guess the question I'm asking, I guess I'm not convinced that we can have a project for funding by September that Renee is talking about, that CEPD could put that together and that the community can agree upon. But I guess the question, Samantha, is can we apply for funding under the $46,000 proposal to receive planning money to help implement the second proposal? So I think more realistically, we could use planning grants to help develop the proposal for resiliency, adaptation, and recovery strategy that you have outlined, which I think is a comprehensive proposal, which we need to discuss with the community and work through with you. But can we use the first proposal to receive funds to help develop that second proposal? Because the idea that you're going to get grant applications together to actually build something under the first proposal, I mean, God bless you, but it seems to me unlikely to me based on what my experience has been recently. So I could understand spending $46,000 if we can use that process to get funding for the second proposal. but to spend $46,000 on grants, potential grants that we don't have projects to actually build seems to me premature, if you know what I'm saying. Nicole, does that
Okay, I
make?
think I'm following what so maybe the time frame will help too. The intent was that part A would be completed and then part B would begin. So
Okay.
And part
There-
A
there-
is, Sam, so I think David's big question is, we're not proposing 4 projects for construction under part A. We are proposing seeking different grant funding for the planning, the pre-con services, the project design, which would help us fund part B proposal and really develop those projects that could be constructible throughout the island.
Well, that's the
And to
question.
answer
I
your
was asking.
question, yes, you can apply for funding for planning and
That's
strategy.
what this
And-
part A we'd be working
And
with.
that's what
getting-
that's what partially funded the 2020 assessment. So there's money for studies and planning. Yes.
Okay, so if part A, if proposal A is to help make proposal B happen, I get it. If part A is independent from proposal B and there are 4 applications for, you talked about projects that CEP wanted to get going on, that's what I didn't understand, and I still don't understand. So what Nicole is saying is that we can make applications for funding to help decide what are the best resiliency projects that we would make part of our comprehensive plan in the second proposal. Is that what you're saying?
Correct. So it would, part A would fund the feasibility studies, planning, design process, and coordination that's going to be required within part B. So yes.
We can do that. That's not how it's set up. But I mean, obviously we could do that.
Well,
I'll
that's my
just
concern.
share.
My concern is that's not how it was set up. And
That's right.
if it was set up that way, you could have it would be one proposal in a sense. But the way you have set it up, it looks as if we're going to make the community is going to make 4 applications for projects under the proposal A, but I don't think there are 4 projects that we can seek. It just doesn't make sense to me. And that's why I'm raising this question the way I'm raising it. And I don't mean to be difficult, but
Sam, I think there's
Yeah.
a discrepancy in you saying projects. I think that's where the clarification's required. I think when David's
Let's
hearing
just
project.
let's go to the next slide and maybe we can talk about both at the same time.
Okay.
Can
Is
I,
Jay back on? Excuse me, there was on the chat, Jay said he could not get on. Jay, are you all set now? I see your video.
Right, I am on now, but my screen is taking up by a Zoom demo ad or something, and I can't get rid of it.
I would, do you have
There's no way I can exit off or get rid of it and,
you on
see.
iMac? Are you on an iMac, Jay, or a PC? Or
I'm on a Mac.
If you're on a Mac, go to your Google and touch the button. It might go back. You got a 2-screen operation going on. Just hit Google and see what happens.
hey, Sam,
Well, I
and,
hate to be messing up the meeting
I
with
can hear you.
this.
do you mind if I ask this? This is kind of outside, this is a broader time scale question, and it's about vulnerabilities and
Mhm.
risk. And I sort of understand what you're saying for the timeline that you're trying to go for to complete the vulnerability assessment. And this wasn't necessarily something that was really built into sort of the direction that the grant applications on Cheryl's work was going either, but I still would like to hear a little bit about your perspective on 2 pieces. Just because I've started to hear more conversation from different people about this. I've even heard Nicole reference this, at least one of these pieces. So the first, I'm just curious, I would love the take for both you and Nicole, Sam and Nicole. The city of Sanibel, I know it's something Joel will be aware of, and I'm just curious what you guys think about this. They really have identified groundwater elevation, that groundwater flooding of being a major risk and concern for Sanibel, maybe even more so necessarily than sea level rise. I mean, I understand that sea level rise is contributing to that, but and I've started to see that come up in a lot of conversations about characterizing risk. And so even if it's not included now, I want to think, Sam, just because you've done the modeling how is groundwater, the rise of groundwater accounted for? What does that look like, and what is your perspective on our risk for that? And I guess the other piece that I've heard Sam talk about when you actually get to the engineering phase, but I'm curious if it will be included, is using something like X Beach to think about how erosion processes will, feed into those vulnerabilities, or how we can kind of account for those too, because those are things that could be going on concurrently. So I'd love to just hear your thoughts on that, or if we could add them later, or if they're a concern, or.
Sure. So groundwater rise is a significant concern across Florida. For every foot of sea level rise, there is a foot of groundwater rise. And what that means is that in areas that are already subject to like tidal flooding, they're already low lying, right? The water is coming right up from the ground, right? So there's a risk of permanent inundation, right? If the water is coming above the ground. The bigger problem is that when it rains, we really need the rain to infiltrate and go into the ground. If the groundwater table is too high, there is no space for the rain to go. And so it will, in an island's case, you hope that it will just run off into the bay or the ocean, right? However, as we start to build infrastructure and put up seawalls or other kind of containment units, and you've got groundwater that's rising, seepage is what we call it when it's coming to the surface, right, and being exposed. When that happens, then you have to really think about how you're going to manage water and flood waters when you've got a contained area. Because if it's coming up from the ground and it's coming from the rain, then you really just have to actively manage it through systems of pumps, containment areas. And one thing that's really a struggle is injection wells. So most of the barrier islands on the West Coast are not familiar with using injection wells to the degree that'll probably be required. The county permit requirements are not up to speed to really handle that kind of next level of design. So it's very important conversation. I think it's a very active conversation. So the water management districts are doing groundwater modeling. So on the southeast side, I was part of the team that developed the very first groundwater model coupled with surface water so that we understood how it was going to move. But really on a barrier island, it's a lot simpler. You're just, you're dealing at a much smaller scale, and your issue is drainage. And you want to be very smart in the way that you design containment, because you don't want to create a flood problem that, that's going to exist now as a result of having these higher groundwater. So for the this is my personal opinion, but for the CEPD's planning, I would not anticipate that they need to do their own groundwater modeling. There's enough research for them to understand how the groundwater table will change over time, and how they would need to, design their drainage systems for it. However, you could do groundwater modeling, but I would very much recommend it be at the water management district scale, or at the very least at the county scale. And I will advise that, in my former position, we spent $1 million a year and probably up to $6 million total on our groundwater modeling exercise. So
with
it may
that
not be the best use of their funds.
With that being said, just wanted to mention the background. You may be already aware of this, but I know that the community panel is working on some stormwater management pieces too. So in your designs as you go, because of that issue of stormwater interacting with any of these potential solutions for shoreline protection, I would assume, I assume this is a case, but I just want to throw this out there. You guys are sort of considering the interaction between potentially worsening flooding on the stormwater side versus the coastal protection piece of things.
It's essential. So it's important at the policy level, right? So, the CEPD needs to be raising it as they're part of the review of the new resilience policy that's coming forward at whether it's state, county, or local level. And then the other piece is actually looking at designs to make sure that that's being considered. That should be happening at the permitting agency. However, it's somewhat new, especially there's younger engineers typically reviewing those permitting applications, and they may not be as familiar with kind of the unexpected consequences. So it's a training exercise, but the industry is moving in that direction. But I think what I tried to raise is that we need to move forward with some technologies that are very mainstream, but that people maybe not are expecting to have to use in the density that they'll have to use in order to manage water on a small site like an island. So that's coming. But that's, you know, that's a piece of it. And so I think what the modeling allows us to do in this second step, which I'll describe now, is allow us to look at those projects in detail and have an understanding of how they will perform, what the impacts are adjacent to them. Because whenever you apply for a state permit, you have to prove that you're not going to impact someone else's property, right? So that it's built into the permitting process, but it's a matter of kind of making sure that something's actually going to work the way you wanted it to work. So your second question was about X Beach. Is that helpful?
Yeah, that was helpful.
So X Beach is a robust shoreline erosion model that incorporates a wealth of, you know, economic considerations into it. And what's typically used for is to justify the benefit costs of a federal renourishment project and you know, the authorization to spend federal funding on public beaches that are severely eroded and in need of aid, right? So what's useful about X Beach is that it allows you to add in that economic piece, but it is designed for a very specific purpose. You know, I would ask Nicole to speak to, you know, the understanding of erosion on the island. It's my understanding they've been managing erosion for quite some time and have a history of, you know, understanding how storms affect it. They've run the S Beach model previously. I think they even have a Delft 3D model as well, and have looked at some of these erosional impacts and have managed the shoreline well. And they design their projects to adapt to the changing conditions as well as sea level rise. And
so essentially it's just saying that it is something that's sort of built into your process.
Yeah, I just don't know if X Beach is the right tool for what we might have a question about. Okay.
I mean, I'm not worried about the tool per se. I think it's just I'm thinking about these as larger processes that even if they're not included in the statute per se, that we really understand what we're at risk for or what might be, you know, influencing our design considerations, and just was curious how you guys are thinking about them.
The piece of your question that I think is important is the economic justification piece. So in order to provide, you know, compelling federal applications, you have to make sure that the benefit cost is above 1 and that there's, you know, significantly more benefits than the cost of whatever the grant is going to be or whatever the local match is. And so, you know, you have to make that case. And so there's some effort into doing that. And so in this part B, this is intended to help CEPD develop their short and long-term plan for adaptation with specific projects moving forward as quickly as desired. In the first step, we will be looking at alternatives. This is separate from the part A. Part A assumes that you have a project in mind, we can flush out quickly and move forward in a grant application. This part B is taking the time to look at all the alternatives that are communicated from the stakeholders, from the district, that are part of all the regional exercises that have been mentioned already, and creating a menu for you so you can see it clearly all at once, the different directions that you can go in to adapt to sea level rise, tidal flooding, and the other risks that have been identified. Along with that, I've talked quite a bit already about policy. Policy is incredibly important at the different jurisdictional levels, and you'll need to remain an advocate for that policy over time. The piece that I want to raise, Carrie, that we were just talking about is the economics, right? So, you know, you have a finite amount of money. You want to make sure that every investment you're making has a very high return, right? And so that's part of the economic analysis of looking at different alternatives, so that not only are you giving a list of options, but you're giving an idea of how much those options cost and what their benefit is to you long-term, right? And that's what helps us figure out which way to go and when. And there's going to be lots more opportunities. We've talked about state funding already, but there's federal funding coming available. There's going to be local match. There's going to be lots of local projects that people are going to ask the CEPD to be part of. And you'll want to know whether or not that's where you want to designate your local match. So it's kind of creating for you
Samantha,
the information you need to come back to. Yep.
Who's going to ask us to be part of projects?
It would be this is what I would do. If I was still at the county level and I finished this resilience assessment and I determined that there's flooding on your island and I would like to address flooding in a regional way, I'm going to reach out to all the stakeholders that are subject to flooding and ask them to, join with me in an application, contribute X dollars of local match, and you will receive some benefit through a regional project. That would be my suggestion. The state is compiling their vulnerability assessment and their resilience plan. It's my understanding that the projects that'll be listed are going to be advanced from, individual entities. But at some point, the state might say, this is how we would need to regionally, this is the funding we're going to designate for, adaptation across the state. So there are always opportunities. It may be through the Department of Transportation. You have a section of road that is vulnerable to flooding, and they may come to you and say, we are willing to now make this improvement to the road. We're willing to not only repave it, but we're going to elevate this section to a certain degree. Do you want us to do this? Yes or no? Do you want to design the side streets to interconnect to it? Do you want us to manage that for you? Do you want to connect your storm drainage to our storm drainage and share a pump? Do you want to, raise seawalls in this area to match what our seawall elevations are? These are continuous conversations that will continue to happen. Please advise me if CEPD doesn't want to take that advocacy role, then there's a good deal, scope that we might want to, change. But you seem to be an active participant in most of these conversations.
I think you've confused me on well, you haven't confused me, I'm just confused. My understanding is our county is focused on infrastructure. My understanding also is on Captiva, what we're first protecting, well, in general, the majority of what we're protecting is private. It's our homes. And so when speaking with Steve Boutel, I didn't think what they were going to do was come anywhere near to helping us for quite some time.
Well, helping in what regard, Linda? Because remember, what the county said their vulnerability assessment was focusing on the infrastructure, the public infrastructure, the water, sewer, the roads, the bridges. So that's what they were focused on, which is part of our island, right? So what do you mean? Say that again.
Could I ask? This is Joel Kiowa with the city of Sanibel. Could I ask a question?
Hi, Joel. Yes, please.
Hi. So sorry, I've been multitasking during this meeting and trying to pay attention as best I can. It's my understanding, and this is why I'm chiming into this point of Linda's question and everything. So it's my understanding with the DEP grant funds, we're talking. So I guess if I'm understanding this APTIM proposal, you guys are talking about, future projects. I heard extending the groin. I didn't know this hypothetical and everything, but my understanding of the DEP funds is that exactly what Linda just said, that it's only for critical infrastructure for projects in the future. So I'm just curious as to how this, and I know that, CEPD is lobbying Tallahassee to kind of make some changes, some positive changes in the statute, but I'm just curious, and if I miss this point, I apologize for wasting your time, but, I'm just curious as to how future proposals for projects, for shovel ground projects and planning and permitting and design projects, how that ties into DEP, because DEP right now is focused on, critical infrastructure. And it's my understanding that, like, for instance, they're worried about your fire department, and if your fire department is not called out in a vulnerability assessment and it's not specifically called out, then you cannot get state funding to elevate your fire department and waterproof your fire department through DEP. That's just and I'm sorry if I'm off base, but that's my understanding and kind of my question.
Joel, I'm with you. That's what I understood. And we've already got our fire department sorted. So
yeah, you guys just redid the fire. I'm just trying to use easy examples, I guess.
And Yeah, so I don't see people, I don't see the county coming to us much at all, maybe in 4 or 5 years, maybe. I don't see those projects anyway. Okay,
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sure down the line in a couple of years, they're gonna, expand it to the stuff like these awesome, green projects that, Cheryl has, these conceptual projects and things like that, and to private property. But just my understanding, and you guys are, you guys are all tied into this stuff too. And if I'm misinterpreting that, maybe I'm off base. I don't know, but just wanted to chime in with that.
the stuff that's here,
Excuse me, Linda, just for a second. This is a great task for Jennifer to reach out to County and Steve Boutel and ask them the question and give us a little one pager back with their words telling us what their focus is. Just to
Renee,
make
I
it
have
clear.
talked to him. I have talked to him. So, I mean, yes, Jennifer can go do it again, but
I
we've
already did, I already met
and
with
she's
Steve.
already met with him too, so we've
So
got
they-
all.
So what exactly did they say, Jennifer?
I believe I sent it in an update a few weeks ago, but essentially what they're saying is their vulnerability assessment will focus on the infrastructure as pointed out in the grant in terms of what you can utilize those funds for regarding adaptation. And that is according to the proposal, I mean, the criteria, it's for infrastructure. So they're going to focus on, the public infrastructure, all the things the county is responsible for, bridges, roads, sewer system, water, all of those things.
I could even drop a list of critical assets in our chat so people can see exactly what
That would
FDEP
be very
considers
helpful.
critical assets.
Because if I'm correct, no,
I
sorry.
wasn't really finished with my question, but thank you. So really, so the final question is, perhaps we should ask them when they intend to expand the horizon.
It's probably based upon what the grants are coming through from the state, so they don't know.
Yes, that's
Okay.
it.
Just a question. So they know
Yeah, and
what-
I just want to, I appreciate what you said. Yes, critical infrastructure is being funded by state.
Could I also ask
But there are-
Sam and Nicole in
there are
terms of
living
valuation
shorelines that
cost
are being
benefit?
funding
Because
by the
obviously that's
state
come
as
up
well.
too. Just because I'm
Everybody-
familiar with some of the, when you use green infrastructure, it's
Wait.
not the easiest thing to value. I was kind
I'm
of
not hearing.
did a lot of the ecosystem service stuff. We have a study through SCCF that does some valuation of ecosystem services. Do you have capacity at APTIM to, I think, because if we're going to justify some of those things, we want to make sure they're valued properly when we present, in a fair way when we present all these options. Do you have the capacity or thoughts on how you would incorporate, evaluation across these different strategies?
All right, I got two folks talking at the same time, but Carrie, I think your question
Oh, I'm
is-
sorry, I was muted. I didn't hear something happened to my sound. I
No problem,
apologize.
because we've done a great job thus far of letting everyone, ask the question and get an answer. And thanks for noticing that, because you and I were both talking at the same time. That's
Yeah,
just-
I didn't notice that. I'm sorry. My
That's
sound was
fine.
turned off. I
So,
apologize.
because in all fairness, Sam was in the middle of saying something. So Sam, would you mind finishing what you were saying and then
Sorry
maybe
about that.
address Carrie's question? Or is it, no, it's cool. It's, it's Captiva, we're cool. So
I'm-
you were in the middle of something. You were saying something. Do you want to continue saying it and then you can answer Carrie's question? Or
Yeah, I'm very apologetic.
I'll pause. Let's reset. How about, please provide direction on what you would like me to talk about next.
No, you were in the middle of saying something. You were answering.
I
And
think you were talking about the critical infrastructure that we were referring to with Lee County and what their FDEP grant proposal was regarding, which was that critical infrastructure. And you were going to comment on that, Samantha.
Right, so there is funding available for critical infrastructure. There are also always funding streams available for living shorelines and other type of green infrastructure. And so, we would identify what those options were and move forward in a direction where we could find an eligible project for a specific funding stream. So if that's the interest of CEPD. And Carrie, I think your question was, do we have a library of costs for the value of green infrastructure? And
Yeah,
the answer
essentially
is
that. Yeah.
yeah, so the answer is yes. There are materials that we pull from that we've used to support, other state master planning efforts in order to try and explain the value of green infrastructure.
Got it.
This is Dick Pyle. I had a question. If you're talking about just critical infrastructure, are they talking about the impact on our critical infrastructure of this water inundation that you were talking about? In other words, if the groundwater level goes up a foot, I would think that would have an impact on the critical infrastructure.
My understanding, Dick, when I've gone down this road before, is that because of having to be prepared for hurricanes and things, that things like our water and our electrical and all of that stuff is already hardened for water inundation. We talked about this a lot in our committee, and we never, and we never found anything that we should be addressing in utilities, okay?
Yeah, thanks, because if the county decided that inundation wasn't important to their ultimate goal is hardening the infrastructure, then we've got a selling job to do to the county to realize how important that inundation is.
Can I also add something? I mean, I thought this purpose of this meeting, I thought we owed it to APTIM to focus on 2 proposals and to have our community focus on these 2 proposals and whether or not they reflect what we believe is possible and reflect the needs of the island. So I'm going to try to focus on those things. I mentioned the first proposal, and I think, and Samantha, I think that it has to be reworked as a prerequisite to the second proposal, as opposed to an independent proposal with 4 grant applications for projects which I don't believe exist. And so I think I'd hate to see us, allocate $46,000 unless that's the cost of updating the vulnerability study. But I think the rest of that part 1 proposal has to be integrated with the second part so that we receive funding for the planning that's associated with the second proposal. That's what seems to me to be the case. With respect to the second proposal, I'm a little unclear as to whether or not APTIM is suggesting or proposing that we develop a resiliency, adaptation and recovery strategy plan for the island as a whole. I think that would be useful, and I'm not sure what we can implement and how we implement it according to what timeline and how we receive money to do it remains to be discussed. But I think that if we had a comprehensive plan for resiliency that would incorporate the whole island so that the whole community sees where we're trying to go, I think that would be helpful. And I'm not sure that when they say they're going to provide a clear implementation plan, when APTIM's going to propose that, whether that's a plan for the island as a whole, or whether it's just a plan for the various projects that they're talking about doing. And that's to me needs to be clarified. Also, you're talking about 5 adaptation project alternatives. The way I read that is you're going to have 5 adaptation project alternatives for a single project. In other words, it's not 5 different sites, but it's 5 possible ways of dealing with the problem that exists at one site. And if that's the case, I just want to better understand that, because we need to understand that in the context of the whole proposal. And then in the end, it looks like we're doing 3 individual projects. Meaning I can imagine, like, if you go back to Cheryl's, she had like 5 different areas, and I'm not sure what an individual project is under this proposal. Is it one area of the Bayside? Is it one private property? Is it, it's not clear to me what 3 individual projects are. And it's particularly unclear to me, and I'm not being critical, I'm just raising questions that I think our panel will ask. It's not clear to me that when you say no new field work is proposed, it looks like no new field work is proposed under anywhere in the second proposal. And I don't quite understand how one comes up with resiliency options for the various areas of our base side of the island without going out there and doing some field work. Maybe I'm mistaken about that, but so I think that we need, I wish we could do a workshop where we could all talk together about these proposals and better understand what they are. But those are my initial comments. And if you go back to your original proposal, where you say we're going to identify the greatest challenges, somehow the identification and dealing with those challenges have to be integrated into the second proposal, because the greatest challenge we have is how we're going to deal with the relationship between private property and public property. As Renee has talked about, we have a lot of private property on the Bayside that borders public property, or the Roosevelt Channel, for example. And we need to understand the jurisdiction and the power and the authority of CEPD. Are we asking private property owners to buy into a comprehensive plan that APTIM and CEPD is going to create and give them some incentives to do it? Or is CEPD going to have an MSTBU or raise money to actually implement the thing itself without getting the permission of private property owners because CEPD has the jurisdiction? I don't even know how you begin to think about these resiliency options until we understand what the authority and the power of CEPD is in terms of doing these projects. Dick Pyle raised it at the last workshop meeting when South Seas said they were going to do a resiliency plan. And Dick said, well, are you going to get approval from CEPD? And Dick was implying that you need approval from CEPD, and the legislative authority suggests that, but you can definitely hear from South Seas that they were not looking to get CEPD's approval. They would let CEPD know, but they didn't know they had to get approval. So those kinds of discussions have to take place as part of this second proposal before we can get moving. And I don't know what the forum is to discuss that, or maybe you guys don't agree with me, but this is the way I see it.
Well, a point of order. You said before we can get moving, not to be confrontational, but the CPD has an obligation to protect the island. And I'm just thinking back to, like, it's pretty obvious that if the sea level is rising, we have to do something about it. And we are way ahead of the game for most places. And we're now looking at, because of this event, that we can get funding. We have to be all over this. We have to be designing, we have to be coming up with templates, with renderings, with ideas, with even beta testing, maybe even trying certain areas of what we want to do. And, we don't want to politibaro it to death. There has to be a combination of action. We don't want to be spinning our wheels all the time. And so it's the CEPD's job, or it's commissioners, to move forward, not just spin wheels. So, I mean, we can look at the concerns of David and their concerns, but, we can't what if it to death either. So I just want to point out the other side of the token on those particular comments.
Well, this is Linda. I agree with David on, okay, let's go back to the first proposal. Unless we have a better idea on what we might be proposing, and right now it's in the 4 applications, if we can get something better to propose other than planning. I agree with David that it's not clear what we're getting other than the updated vulnerability study. And I think moving forward as fast as possible in terms of being able to present some possibilities in this fall and to present some grant applications this fall is critical. That's what I would like to do as well. So where am I?
Isn't that what we're doing though? Isn't that what APTIM's saying? They want to get the paperwork done so we have the grants, so we can start designing and move forward. Isn't that exactly what we're getting?
So I guess where I would be coming out is I would suggest first off, so that they can get moving, and I don't think anybody will disagree with it, is to have the first one just to get, let's just get done with the updated vulnerability study as fast as possible, since it's a prerequisite for anything else.
Okay.
Okay, and we don't have any dates in here, but get done with that. And I don't know how long it takes. And
Linda?
then,
There's,
yes,
This is Jay.
yeah,
When we say update the vulnerability analysis,
yes,
we all need to understand that the only vulnerability analysis that's been done to date is our vulnerability to sea level rise. We have
yes.
not done any vulnerability analysis on increased storminess.
Correct. That's why we need to get that added in. Jay.
Right. So, I mean, to me, that's very important.
Agreed.
That-
That's what we want to do. That's what,
Okay. So I'm just saying it's a lot more than updating vulnerability analysis. I mean, we've got only half the job has been done on vulnerability. We need APTIM to do a vulnerability analysis to all the interior challenges we're going to have from increased storminess and so forth.
Sam, what do you have to say?
so I agree. I think what's in proposal 1 or A or whatever,
Uh-huh.
what I'm suggesting is that since we're not too sure about the template for application and all, and we may have some misunderstandings or disagreements about that, is to potentially take that part out of the proposal, fund the whatever the residual is, which I think is still significant, and get that done, agree to that and get that done ASAP. Meanwhile,
That
we
makes
can-
sense.
What?
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's what I think we should be doing. Meanwhile, we're going to try to figure out what can we apply for in September 1st. I think it's great if we have some conceptual projects someplace. Haven't seen those that I know of, but I could find. And let's start working as to what those might be.
But Linda, do we really have ideas of what we want to apply for yet? I mean, we have
I
Cheryl.
don't know. Jay, I don't know. I mean, I'm hearing that perhaps we do. And I think that would be a good working group. Maybe we should call it a working group instead. A working group that can start working on what might we be able to apply for, and if so, then proceed with that.
Jay, I'd like to insert my thoughts here. I have to go back to the old 25 years ago. When we hired Coastal, whatever they were called then, which is now, our engineering, it's APTIM and Coastal Engineering. They basically told us what had to be done. You want to get your beach renourishment? Okay, this is what we're going to do. We do this, 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 and this. We didn't second guess them. We didn't micromanage. We didn't backseat drive. We just knew they could do it and they'd get it done, and they did it. So I know that everything you're all concerned about is concerning, but I'm really worried about the fact that we might be micromanaging, and we do not want to be in that situation. So
No, I don't want to micromanage either. I'm just, trying to understand what it is that APTIM's going to do. I thought I understood this project. I thought they were going to develop an overall resiliency plan for us, yet we've spent our entire time here discussing, how we're going to get funding for various things, when I don't see that we even have a plan yet, an overall plan for how we want to protect the island.
Sam, can you give us the 2-minute
Yeah,
description?
please.
Yeah, give us the 2-minute elevator speech of what you're going to do.
How to protect the island?
Yeah, I mean, no, how to move forward, yes. And I'm just for the.
So I think the strategy that you were describing would be developed, as part of the larger scope, beginning with a review of the vulnerabilities that have already been identified. While you have the 2020 report, there's lots of other information out there that's useful to understand the future risks that you'll be facing. And so it's about distilling that information into what's relevant to you and then creating a menu of options for you, right? There are existing kind of hard infrastructure options as far as adding seawalls, elevating structures, elevating certain types of equipment, adding pipe pumps, trying to create certain areas of if some neighborhoods cannot be elevated, then you build some sort of levee system around them with active pumps. Could be a need for, I mentioned injection wells, right? Or there may be a need if there's higher areas within the island, then you extend the exfiltration trenches and look at ways that you can kind of hold water temporarily and then allow it to drain, after the storm has passed. And so there's all these types of hard infrastructure alternatives that are available. But then it's my understanding there would be an interest in looking at ways that not only manage stormwater, but that don't create a water quality impact to the bay. And so how do you add green infrastructure in order to mitigate some of the impacts that occur when you are pumping water faster or storing in a certain area? Yep.
Sam, forgive me, but in order to get the funding, you have to include all these things to be able that they check off all the boxes. Say, hey, here's your money.
No, these are options that would be part of your strategy that through your through your process or your stakeholder engagement process, you would decide what are the priorities. We would give you the costs and benefits of each, and you would be able to decide based on that which ones you would want to include in a plan. And then whenever there is a hurricane and money is available directly to you, you know what you want to do first.
Right.
Whenever there is a state or federal funding opportunity that you're eligible for, you know what you want to advance first. So it's about having that plan or that strategy of how you would execute it. The second piece of that is you may find that there are things that need to be done in the next 10 years.
Right.
There's also going to be things that need to be done over the next 30 years, and you need an investment strategy for that. And to Mr. Mintz's point, you need to figure out as a community how you would afford those adaptation strategies and what that looks like, whether you talk about bonds, whether you look, to the county for support, what is the mechanism in order to have sustained living on the island, and how do you fund that? So that's the piece of what I call like the capital improvement plan. It's not necessarily wholly what you're responsible for, but how are you going to work together so that the island lasts more than 30 years, right?
So for our next 10 years, we have to focus on maybe getting hit with 5 inches to 15 inches, maybe next 20 years. So obviously we want to be very focused on that. So the short-term plan, isn't it possible to make that a priority, and that the longer-term plan dovetail with the focus on the short-term plan? Is that your proposal? Because I always thought that was the proposal.
That is the initial lens. It absolutely is. What I don't want you to miss out on is, so, DOT has a, kind of a 20-year planning horizon. They may decide that they want to update your road within the next 10 years.
Gotcha.
You need to not only let them know that you're in favor of that, but is there anything else that you would want to do around where they're going to be working so that you're kind of updating at the same time? And so it's about that sequential planning and having the information that you can tap into and do it, logically.
So with your presentation, you're going to give us the 10-year and the 20 and the 30-year all by September, so that if there is a DOT request for it because of their 10-year plan, we will have the material to say, well, this is what our plan entails. So yeah, I mean, so yes, please put in that infrastructure because we already researched it. So in other words, you're preparing this initial presentation is a framework, a beginning, a foundation for not just the next 10 years, but the next 30, 40 years. Am I correct?
That's the goal of the strategy, but I will share, it was not my intent to have the full, both scopes complete by September.
Right.
My intent was to have the very first scope complete so that
Right.
you were ready for state funding. If you found an eligible project that you wanted to move forward with, we would give you a template grant application to use, whether it's with the state or maybe it's another organization, and that you would be ready to move quickly on something that you prioritize. The
And
second scope,
Well, hold
we
on.
would intend to work with you over time. You
Yeah.
know, as you know, depending on the type of modeling that we would do to look at a specific project and its performance and its impacts, you know, that takes a little bit longer time. And I would anticipate that we would work on that over a year.
Yeah, understood. So with the first part, who in the audience has an issue with what they're trying to do and finds problems with it, that they're not doing what's best for us as islanders? Because this is what
Yeah, this is what I'm getting.
from managing, candidly.
Yes, I'll respond to that, Renee, directly. If in fact, and this goes back to what Samantha and Nicole was saying together at different times. One of those 4 applications that you're talking about in the first proposal can go to planning and developing the projects under the second proposal, which could be very quick projects. That's great. If you're saying to us that you want to use some of those, one of those 4 proposals, or 2 or 3 or 4 of those 4 proposals to actually get money for a shovel-ready project of some sort on Captiva, then if that's what you're looking to do, we need to get together very quickly and figure out what kind of possible shovel-ready project there could be to get funded and to develop. We are not in the position sitting here right now, nor is CEPD or anyone else on Captiva, to come to you with a shovel-ready project that you will have to seek funding for in September. If that's what you're trying to do under the first proposal, in addition to planning funding, which I'm still not sure is available, but assuming Nicole's right that it is, because I don't think that's what you were contemplating in this first proposal. But if planning's available, I say we get as much planning money for the second proposal as possible by September. But if you're looking for a shovel-ready project, as Renee is implying, and get that funded in September, we don't have one yet. And we would need to put our heads together and produce one for you, so you have something to do with.
Well, we're not producing it. If APTIM in the next 6 months comes up with a rendering that everyone loves and say, yeah, we can apply for this now. It could be shovel ready, which means that after September, let's say everyone is in agreement of some little section. Again, I use the example of the blind path living seawall. They say, let's try a little more of that. I'm just saying, then that's all I'm inferring. So in 6 months.
Renee, 5 months, September's 5 months from now.
5 months from now, thanks.
If Samantha is wanting to do that, and I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, I'm just saying we have to, or maybe she, APTIM, has to put together a project to do that. And if that's not feasible, then this application, this proposal should be reworked so that most of that money, to the extent we can get it from the state, goes into number 2, proposal 2. We need to know what Samantha needs from us to make this proposal happen. What I'm saying.
She needs the vote of the CEPD board. That's what she.
I don't think that's what she's saying. I really don't. I think she.
Samantha, can you reply to David and I?
Yeah, thank you for this conversation. This is very helpful, right? So my understanding is that we would not be applying for a shovel-ready project in September, right? Because shovel-ready implies that you have full design and you've got a permit in hand.
Right.
So
obviously,
however, if you have a permit in hand for something, we could do that, but I'd have to understand, and I apologize, I don't know what that is offhand. But if it was dune restoration, right, you might already have a permit for that. And if we looked for a funding source in order to do a very extensive dune restoration program, that's a possibility. But likely, we're just getting to the conceptual level of something that we can describe in detail, describe its benefits, describe how it would work. You know, conceptual has a rendering, but it's not plans and specs. It's not a permit.
Right. Okay, now I understand clearly what you meant by shovel ready. Shovel ready means we already got a permit and paid for. Okay, I got it. But, yeah, all right, and right, you have to put plans and specs. And if you like some of the renderings that Cheryl did, I'm sure you'll want to throw plans and specs in. You're not going to try to, silence a great idea if you, choose it's a great idea. All right, so I think David and I are on the same page. Thank you, David. I just wanted to get a clearer picture on what the concern was. So I think we're both in violent consensus.
Yeah, so let's take one of Cheryl's renderings, okay? She has a rendering in Chadwick Bayou, for example. And she described why that's the appropriate rendering for that particular area. How would you take that rendering and somehow develop so you could get funding in September to take that further? Is that what you're contemplating?
If that's the concept you want to advance and we, kind of ground truth that, there's nothing else that needs to be considered or, I have not reviewed her designs, right? So I watched her PowerPoint, very interesting concepts. So yeah, I think you're right though. Conceptual design is something that's been laid over some elevation data. You've demonstrated that there's, not negative impacts on adjacent properties or you're not causing flooding on any additional areas. You've kind of prepared the criteria that would be relevant for the permitting agencies. You have an understanding of if it would move forward or not.
So what would DEP or anybody fund you given that you have that, what would they fund you for? What would your application be requesting money to do?
So I think you're touching on it. It's design, it's the next it's the permitting process, it's moving through that next step. So on that.
The plans, the engineering, come on, it's a bunch of stuff, obviously.
No, I understand that. So that's what you're saying.
It's like a rendering with an architect. Here's a drawing of your new house.
I understand exactly what it is, Renee, but what I'm asking Samantha, is that one of the things DEP is funding? My understanding from what Joel said and what Linda said and what Steve Patel said is that's exactly the kind of thing they're not going to be funding. And that's why I need to get my handle on this.
What I'd like to do as one of our very early steps, and I have it listed, is I call them menus, but I want to give you an opportunity to see the types of projects that are eligible from certain funding sources, broader than just the state funding that we talked about. Give you the idea which direction would you like us to focus on? And you'll be able to see what types of projects are eligible for those funding sources. If there's something that fits, we would develop a template for you so that you could be in the mix sooner than later.
And Sam, isn't it true that since we are a special district and we're allowed to pursue our own funding, we're not at the whims of Lee County? That's the beauty of the bill that just got passed. Am I correct or incorrect?
So you're focused on the state funding pool, right? Is that?
Well, with the Florida legislature just passed.
It broadened who was eligible to apply.
Right.
Yes.
And they're still tweaking the bill to make sure that there's, it's more user friendly. But the bottom line is we are a special district entity that we ask for our own funds. And I'm not super familiar with where those funds emanate from, but I assume they emanate from the governor and then passes them to the various entities like a municipality, like a county, like a special district. Hello. And that's where we're focused on. So we are not at the whims of the county. So I don't understand why we're concerned right now what the county's going to do, because we can do what we want. Am I correct or incorrect? Sam?
I understand, you have a responsibility to your own property. You want to move forward. I'm coming from a county perspective. So it's always a benefit to have partners, for everybody to be on the same page, for everybody to understand what's happening. That said, districts often move forward to address their specific local needs faster than maybe a county does. That happens all the time.
By our first, second, third, fourth, and fifth beach renourishment. The county gives us money, but we created the project, and the feds gave us money, and the state gave us money. And we incorporated, as you said, working together with the county's money. So I just hope the audience understands that we are special district. This is not about what the county, it helps when the county helps us, but the county just is not going to run, because we're a special district. We are going to with it and try to get funding wherever we can. And I'm sure the county at some point in time, when the time comes, will help us. But anyway, that's all. It's any other questions or
I just want to say, Samantha, that what Renee just said is very important. The way we conceived this whole project that APTIM is proposing could be a project which is solely funded by Captiva taxpayers through the CEPD, if the populace of Captiva believes it's necessary to make this island resilient for its own properties and for its future. So that is a very unhappy, but it is a reality and could be the bottom line here, that you come up with a comprehensive resiliency plan for Captiva that we fund ourselves through the CEPD. To the extent that we can get state funding, because we're a special district, CEPD is a special district, and we have got rid of that glitch, so to speak, then they may be able to get some of the funding. To the extent that we get federal funding or even county funding to do some of these projects, that's all great. And that would be integrated into our short-term, medium-term, and long-term plans to see what's available. But the major thing is you guys have to come up with a comprehensive resiliency plan that our community buys into. We have the wherewithal to support that resiliency plan on this island. And that's what you have to come up with. To the extent that we get money from different pots, that's great. But you got to give us the blueprint for making this happen. Does that make sense?
Very clear. Thank you.
Sam, one more thing. And if anyone can do it, APTIM can. They're one of the best in the country. Let's, this is like talking to the lawyer that's got some of the biggest cases. And you say, well, you got to do that for us. Well, duh, I'm one of the best. What do you think's going to happen? Sam, do you have any, some more for this presentation, please? Because we've kind of got locked in there, and I'd like to move a little forward if possible.
I think we've touched on all of these elements, but the idea being that, we're providing you a menu of solutions. This fits into the resilience plan, right? This comprehensive strategy that was just discussed, talking about projects, policy, all the opportunities to advance resilience, looking for when those would be, appropriate to take advantage of, putting together the strategy for how you would work with the entities around you, as well as your residents and your stakeholders. And then zeroing in on a few specific projects to move them forward, test them and see if they're actually, the right ideas in the right place. And then if you're ready, moving forward with some project permitting assistance, if there is something that you want to get underway sooner rather than later.
Right. Anyone else who has not asked a question would like to, say anything or?
Yes, I would like to, because I'm sorry I had to step out for a couple minutes. So, and I'm sure, so on part one, are there any changes to be made on the first proposal? Did we agree to anything?
No.
Do we now understand what the 4 applications are and conceptual? I understand the templates for the different agencies, that they may require different templates. I understand that part.
Yeah, so my suggestion is maybe breaking this into 2 tasks. The first is, updating the analysis for the pieces that are missing and giving you that menu of what's eligible for funding and what types of projects. And if we can reconvene, you can decide if you want to move forward with the conceptual project in the grant funding cycle this year or not.
Okay, that's great. And when, I think we can't approve this until our next meeting, is that correct?
Yeah, anything voted on has to be done at board meeting.
Okay, so assuming that we voted on it in the May meeting, when might we expect the results, Samantha?
Assuming it was approved, when did you say?
Oh, it's May 8th.
May meeting.
May
Within
9th.
this will be This will be at the board meeting on May 9th and
May 9th. If we could approve it. May
The
9th.
other option, this is Jen, I'm sorry to interrupt. The other option would be if you all desire, those commissioners that are on this call, if you would like me, I'm supposed to meet with Chairman Sylvia tomorrow. If you would like me to bring up possibly hosting a special meeting that just has this on the agenda, we could possibly, if everyone's schedules work out, possibly do that next week. We need 1 week, 7 days, or the week after actually, 7 days to special notice this. So actually, if we did it tomorrow and we special noticed it tomorrow, then we could have the meeting next Friday, if you all would like. I'm just giving that as an option.
thank you, Jennifer. Sam, excuse me, Sam, and thank you, Jennifer. Sam, so will it make a difference if it's voted on a week from now or at the meeting on the 9th as far as the work that would, be encompassed, assuming you're approved, ready for action? Does it make a difference?
I think the time frame is 45 days. So I'm just making sure you have enough time before, if you do want to move forward with the second task of this first scope, that there's enough time to do some of the stakeholder engagement and grant template development. Yes.
My view is that I think they should be approved before they start work. And I think for getting it done sooner rather than later, because there's a lot of uncertainties going forward on these projects and stuff. So I would like to have the special meeting, say Friday next week, approve it.
What's the day, Linda? Because I'm flying out on a certain day. What's the day? What's the date?
It'd
You
be
have to
the
physically be around.
22nd. It would be the next Friday would be the 22nd.
The 22nd. Okay, I can be around. I mean, I'm cool. I'm just saying, I'm just trying to
Right. Is
move
it
it forward.
available?
All right. So do we have 3 people to physically we have to be there, right, Jennifer?
So
Yes,
let's
I need
just-
3 of you physically there, 2 can zoom in.
Yeah.
So I know that Bob
You're gonna
will
be
be
around.
back, and I'm sure if I speak with Chairman Sylvia, I can confirm this all with him tomorrow. Renee, if you're there or Linda are there, then we're set.
Well,
Or-
wait a minute.
or Mr.
Excuse me. I'm acting chairman today, right? Can I just officially make it a special meeting for next Friday?
Well, that's just
Um,
make sure we're gonna have.
I
a quorum.
don't, no,
We
I
do
don't
have a
think so,
quorum.
because the court, go ahead, James. You may have the rules of procedure up, but if it's my recollection, it has to be called by the chairman, I believe. I don't think it's acting. I think it says chairman.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, is there any reason why? Well, all right, well, look, if it can be done, I'm officially saying, go ahead and notice since we have 3 people to show up, number 1.
Okay,
If for some
Okay.
reason you find out, oh, no, you can't, then find John and ask him that the will of the board currently, the 3 members here, Dick, are you cool? Are you okay with this to have a special meeting to approve this or not approve this?
Yes, I'm in
Okay.
favor of it.
All right, so there you
Okay.
go. You already have
We
3
can do
board
that.
members. If
Okay.
there's any issue, let them know there are 3 board members, that it's the will of the other board members to do this, and there will be enough
Okay.
board members should he not be able to show up.
okay. And then, so with that said, James, can you go ahead and get this posted in the paper? Can you, as soon as we get done, can you call the Island paper and see if we can get this posted for tomorrow?
All right, and are we looking for a 1 PM time frame?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
I'm sure.
Okay, that's fabulous. Okay, next question. Question equals next. So, the discussion again, while I was out, I apologize. Are there going to be any changes to the proposal from APTIM for the second part?
I just have one question. There's no dollar amount associated with the second proposal. Is there some reason why there isn't a dollar amount, or what is that dollar amount supposed to be?
Yeah, I
So-
think. Oh, you're
Sam, I'll
on.
let-
No, go
I
ahead.
think we were still trying to refine a few details based upon the meeting today to see if there were any changes made. And so we didn't want to put a dollar amount if we were going in a different direction. So that's where, from my point of view, we still had a little bit of unclarity with costing it out. So that's why we wanted to meet with you all today to make sure everything was in agreement of strategy, developing a small, short-term plan, long-term plan, And I think we are. So I think based upon the details today, we were going to come back and finalize the costing process. Sam, did I get that right for you?
Sure. I mean, I don't mind sharing kind of order of magnitude. You know, there's
Yeah,
four tasks.
yeah, that's fine.
4 tasks listed here. So for the evaluation of alternatives, we had budgeted $100,000 under that, but I'm just rounding up. Strategy development is about $90,000. Project performance was about 150, and project permitting was 145.
The second project performance was 115 or 150? What did you say?
150, but those are round numbers.
Now, the first one was it, did I see 45,000? The first, just getting
Part
us
A.
to September. That was how much?
Part A is the 46,000.
Part A. Any idea how much money we could possibly attain grant wise? I mean, I know you guys are always, trolling for any monetary amount. 40 gets us 200 maybe, or maybe the money for the other grants. I mean,
I would never want to, falsely promise that you're going to win a grant.
I'm asking just for potential.
Range of magnitude, they've been giving, planning grants on the order of $40,000 to maybe $150,000. And then for pre-design services, it increases from there, and I think is a little more on point with what they're expecting. But I will say for grants, they expect a 50-50 match. So consider that it's for some of the grants, but just consider that
so
whatever you put in is what you're getting back out.
Okay, so Sam, at the meeting next week, can you give us sort of like the 50-50 grants that would, like the obviously I'm hoping that the money that we can qualify for will be as close as possible to the other projects you said are going to be 150, 115, et cetera, et cetera. So for us to sort of be prepared, it would be nice to know, well, if we get this grant, then that entire thing is covered. If we get that grant, then it's a 50-50. So, we have sort of an idea of what we're staring at on our side. So that would just be helpful. And again, I know there's no promises, but we'd like to know what the possibilities are.
Understood. I'll pull that for the state grants, and it'll help clarify that question about critical infrastructure as well for you. But I just want to say that in the first scope is when we're really outlining all the funding options. So I will give you something for next Friday, but I want you to know there's a bigger story. Okay.
Yeah. So the 40 gets us to what the other potentials are. That's all. Yes.
And Samantha, could you just give us a time on the second proposal? In addition, I mean, you gave us some broad numbers, but there's no timeline in there as far as I could see either.
Not going to know yet.
Well, I think the first 3 tasks are more easy to define the timeline in. And Sam, did you say about a year to complete the first 3?
Yeah, that's what I would anticipate.
Okay, task 4 is the pink elephant in the room, project permitting. We pretty much know how long it takes to permit a project from the state, but because it's touching the water, we have to go through the Army Corps of Engineers through the 404 permit process. And the Corps is using their understaffed and about 200 projects backlogged right now. So they won't even give you a time frame. So the project permitting is really Corps of Engineers dependent to get that.
No, but before the permitting, the 1 year time frame is very helpful.
Yeah. And David, I did want to address your one comment. I want to clarify a statement that we do have in the proposal. You mentioned about no new field studies. That was in reference to the project permitting, because sometimes the agencies can require a very extensive natural community or some type of underwater resource. That's what the no new field work was referencing to. So I'll clarify that in the scope of work, because definitely doing some of these evaluation of alternatives, we're going to be out there, but I really appreciate the comment. It was more in reference to the permitting.
Okay, and I realized that I did a lot of talking, probably much too much on this thing, because I think I was asking questions that I thought the panel would ask, and I thought we had an obligation to go through the proposal to ask you and Samantha about your general views about resiliency, et cetera, et cetera. And so because I talk so much, I will put it into writing what I think might be useful adjustments to these proposals that would be helpful. And I will get it to you before Friday's meeting, so at least you get an opportunity to see it.
Okay.
Thank
that would
you.
be
And we
great.
really appreciate your input too, David.
And, okay, so would you include a timeline with a
Yes.
Gantt chart, whatever, on the dependencies with these various activities? Okay, and another one, and finally back to Brazaga. Do you see any synergies, and how is that reflected in these proposals? How are they reflected in these proposals?
Great question, Linda.
So Sam,
Or is that, you need to work that through a little bit?
or
Well,
I
I'll
guess
just admit, I have not read their written, I don't have a copy of their written proposal. So if you have that to share, I'm happy to dive in and draw direct lines. I watched their overview on PowerPoint and saw that they highlighted the threats that they were going to look into, right? So rainfall, storm surge, sea level rise. So my perspective is that a lot of that information already exists publicly. I'm just trying to distill it into a deliverable for you that you can use for your applications. And so
could I suggest that before next week, you meet with Brazaga and understand what synergies we might be able to obtain and how they affect these two proposals? Is that too much to ask?
it is not. I can absolutely speak with them. When you say synergies, what are you hoping to achieve? Would you want to?
You're gonna do a bunch of work. You're gonna do a bunch of work. Are we overlapping work?
So I'll just say, it sounds like they are going to look at the threats from the beginning that are affecting South Seas Plantation. So they are going to repeat the work that Cheryl has already done. Does that make sense? So I will communicate that to you, but it sounds.
But I
Okay.
think they also want to come up with an overall resilience strategy for the island or something along those lines. They're going beyond threat analysis, in my opinion. Could be wrong. So I think there may be significant overlap in the second proposal as well.
Perfect.
I don't know.
I can
But-
ask Alec about that.
And yeah, I thought you all had a wonderful relationship. So I think if there's ways that this could be done synergistically and save money for the island for implementation, that would be wonderful.
and Sam, when we talk with Alec, I think we need to get an idea of what his time frame is, because if he's, behind and where we would be starting up, I think that's something we want to disclose just in case, it would impact that getting the vulnerability assessment done by September 1.
Yeah, could I just ask you guys, if you're going to do a vulnerability assessment, which is expanding it to storminess, as Jay had talked about before, and all the other things that Florida DEP wants, could you put that in a form that we could use? I mean, rather than doing it later, put it in a form that we could use to educate the community. So we've had the vulnerability study, which included inundation and the bathtub model, so to speak. But we never integrated storminess or hurricanes or anything else into it. And if you can sort of weave that into a PowerPoint presentation so that we can, people on the island understand what we're facing, that would make it a lot easier down the road to get people to accept the resiliency options that we're going to be proposing.
And I'm assuming, APTIM, as part of your proposal, you will be supporting public engagement. Is that true?
We absolutely will. So yes, we can create such a PowerPoint. I will highlight that the two pieces that I really heard Brazaga discuss were redoing the vulnerability analysis, and they really wanted to meet with stakeholders. But I don't know that they had like a public engagement piece, so we can plan for that.
No, I don't think they're going to do public engagement. Well, who knows what they're going to do. But
Yeah,
I don't
so-
I see you guys
Right.
supporting the CEPD in the public engagement.
Correct.
Renee,
Yes.
This is Dick Pyle. I also wanted to thank Carrie Schumann for her thoughtful review of the two proposals. That was very good work and very illuminating to me. So I thank you, Carrie.
Well,
Thanks.
also, that was my question. APTIM, we are very heavily invested with Carrie and the SCCF, and we think it's crucial. How can she be woven in with what you're doing for the good of the island, to put it very succinctly? I mean, here she is working 5 days a week, and what's her role going to be? Because we don't want to pay you on something she can be doing, because in the big picture we do a lot of things with you. And so have you thought about how Carrie can be of help? Because she is as I said, we're heavily invested with her, and she came all the way from New Hampshire to change her future to work with us, and we owe her that.
So I know Carrie and I have emailed offline a little bit, and we're trying to set up a meeting to discuss roles of resiliency further, how we'll each interact. And I think when we have a lot of the public outreach meetings, that we'd really look to Carrie to come, invite members of her that she works with. I think once we get the ball rolling, we'll have meetings with both the CEPD, including Carrie in them, because she is a valuable asset to the team.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Carrie, this is David Mintz. Could you send your critique or your
yeah, sure.
to Jay and to me, because neither he nor I have seen them.
Sure, I'll go ahead and I can send it to Nicole and Sam. And I asked some of those questions, and like like Nicole said, we are working towards getting together to start to have that conversation about how we can collaborate. So yeah, I'll do that right after the meeting here, David.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just add, from personal experience, coordination is very much a full-time job. There are so many agencies touching your work, and that will be a part of this conversation. So yes, I'm happy to share any of my experience or, tricks of the trade with Carrie, and definitely make sure she's got the best information to communicate. I think that's really what's most important, because that's how decisions are made. People want information from a trusted source. So we want to make sure she's well prepared in every room she's in.
So before we finish this meeting, I have a question for Jennifer, and it's not related to this. Jennifer, next week is an apportionment discussion for the workshop. Can you just tell me what it is, please?
Next week, Thursday,
Yes, please. Yeah.
we actually, I thought,
Weekly workshop.
I'm sorry. I thought we were gonna push, I plan to have the commissioner orientation, because that was supposed to be this week. So I was gonna push that to next week.
Linda said she can't make it.
Okay, no, the reason I ask,
sorry. Go ahead.
Jennifer, is because, as you know, we're kind of we have some new numbers that have to be crunched with The Economist, who is not responding to Daniel's request as far as engagement. And he said he would get in touch with the rental agencies, and that means he'll make a call, and maybe he gets through, maybe he doesn't. And then there might be a discussion Monday. So I would, if we can include maybe 2 subjects, whoever wants to attend, because Daniel and I have been in discussion regarding plan A, B, and C about getting, because as everyone on this conversation knows, our analysis was done for recreational benefits during the red tide outbreak, which is completely incompatible with reality as far as recreational benefits go on this island. So we have 3 alternate things that because I've been in doing some research with former chairman of the CEPD, and I think we will have some interesting points, but I don't have much hope that our economist is going to actually be able, because today's Thursday, and Dave has contacted the agencies. There's been no phone call. We even asked the economist, I asked through leaving a message, and so has Daniel, Can we foster the phone call, get them set up so you can be ready for your questions? In other words, instead of him saying, well, I'll give them a call, we're saying, oh, we'll put them on the phone for you. What time would you be available? And let us coordinate it and put it on a silver platter. And we have no response. Daniel, you around? Do we have a response yet?
Yeah, Dan, I was gonna say, Dan sent an email today to the realtor companies. So Dan, do you want to just talk about the gentleman's response and how we plan to hook that up with Dr. Strong? And then just to clarify, Renee, what you're asking for, since Linda, I heard you say that's right, you can't be there next week. So then maybe you want to just change the workshop again and we'll have it just be about the Dr. Strong update. Is that what you're saying, Renee?
Oh, I think we can do both because my 3 ideas, I'll talk to you a little, Dan already knows what they are.
Yeah, Linda can't go, so we can
It doesn't
postpone
matter.
the commissioner.
Well, the most important thing is there is a timeline. At the end of August, we have to have our numbers.
They go ahead and have it without me next Thursday. I don't have anything additional to add to the
Yeah,
portion.
exactly. Well, the point is I'm working on it. I think I have some solutions. And
Good.
all we know is that Dan did get through to Ziggy and the other person, and they're
Yeah.
more than happy to take his call. But we can't find out from Dr. Strong when he's going to make that call, if he makes that
I
call.
see.
And
I
so
see.
it's the same, forgive me, tap dance that we get. So I have some solutions, and I think they're very viable solutions, but we can't, unless we make a move, nothing moves forward. And it's unfortunate, but it's a reality. And we have apportionment to deal with. And the last thing we want to do is work with the records based on an inaccurate assessment during the red tide. It's not been fixed. We have to fix it. And now we've reached the crucial stage. There's no more waiting, period. So I'm willing to jump in with both feet, with the whip, and make it happen. So if there's no conversation with our chairman and the economist, because the economist never got through or didn't prepare for it or whatever, then next Thursday, I have some answers, and I will be in touch with you like tomorrow or something. I'll give a call and we can talk about it and move forward on it so that we have a good discussion the following Thursday. So just put them both on. It won't-
The other item, our previous discussion, did we reach any conclusion about how to work the issues on what's private and how we can deal with those, what we can do on private property, et cetera? Was that resolved?
What's the question?
Yeah, I know. Are you talking about the individuals who've placed their gates and things on their easements across from the beach? No.
I'm back on Kyle's original question about what's we've got private property and we want to do stuff for sea level rise on it.
They have to have our permission. According to the statute, what I've sent out and what Ralph has read, they have to have our permission.
Right.
Can we get that vetted by anybody so we don't go?
I have talked with Ralph about that today and he's going to get back to me. But yes, I believe we can get it vetted. The other people I want to send it to are our lobbyists because they're very familiar with the way legislation reads. So I want to get their input as well. And then once I have that, I'll report out.
Okay, and
And
Carrie
Linda,
told me that in
Jennifer.
SCCF, in SCCF, there is Matt, somebody or other, who's a new hire, who's a policy type person. You might want to check in with him. I don't know if it's relevant in this case, but he may be another resource.
Yeah, so he's just starting as our policy director. He does have some legal background. I can't remember if he's taken the bar in one state, but he is working on that. So he might be able to provide some, supplemental advice.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just as an FYI, the board collectively, the community collectively, I'm sure will be working very hard to put teeth into the concept of the CEPD being able to, do all the things we just said, or we're going to supercharge it. And that's something we're used to doing. And it's like Jennifer said, you start with the lobbyists because they have to introduce the lawyers to put in the language with teeth, have more of tenacity to protect our interests like we're just talking about. So Jennifer's absolutely correct on that. Really, you start with the lobbyists, you get the right verbiage, you get more of the law. It's not just interpretation. Obviously, we want to supercharge it. I'll use that terminology. Is Max's last name 4G? Who's Max's last name?
No, Matt, I think she said. Max 4G is
Oh,
a,
okay. Oh, no, I heard Max. Okay, so is there anything else regarding today's presentation? Because we don't want to keep them going if we're talking, about that other item. Is there any, are we done? Everybody there?
Renee,
Yes.
I just want to make a comment. I very, very much appreciate you allowing David and I to participate in this meeting as panelists. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jay. And the reason it was a great idea is because you add value. And
Okay, I hope
if you
so.
add value, you're not going to be invited. I'm joking. Oh, but thank you. And I think it's a great idea to have, for community outreach purposes, the community panel that, as you know, 22 years ago, we fought very hard to create that. And to not work together is a step backwards, not step forward.
Exactly. Thank you, Renee.
Thank you. And thank you for your help. Okay, so APTIM, Dr. Sam, can I call you Dr. Sam? And by the way, Nicole, you have to talk less during the meeting. No, I'm joking. You said like 6 things. What happened? Anyway, all right.
Sam just took all the words from my mouth.
I noticed. All right. Well, listen, thank you, everyone. I will call Jennifer, do we need a motion to conclude the workshop?
you don't need yes, I mean, yes, you do, but yes,
Become
you do.
Politburo.
But you can just say, I'm just trying to keep you straight and legal. So yes, you should call for a motion to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor. We don't have to go do a roll call.
No, I would hope not. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So let's make a motion. I will, Linda, we need a motion. All right.
All done.
Thank you. All right. Sounds good to me. All right. Listen, thank you, everyone. Everyone has my number if you want to know something. And thank you very much. And it's a pleasure being on this island and being special. Because this island is very special. And it's all you need to make it that way.
I hope you win the $50.
Oh,
Thank you kindly.
all right. Take care, everybody. I'm signing out.